person's pain.
Yes.
I think that's what's happening is that you perhaps don't intend to do it, but
Yeah.
if you praise it too much,
Yes.
that person been involved in somebody else's abuse, what you've done is you've belittled their personal pain.
Exactly.
Exactly.
That's a very good point. That's a very good point.
And in Afghanistan, Moazzam, I mean, I'm sure you're aware as well, Afghanistan is a society that's very interconnected. And we spoke about the personalization of power. One of the reasons is that, the way that society is constructed is that, people live in their local villages or their localities, or certain villages are inhabited exclusively by certain tribes, right? So the thing is that in Afghanistan, everyone is related to someone. This is something that Afghans have noticed as well. Everyone has, either by way of ethnicity, they share a common ethnicity with a very influential figure, or they share a common tribal background. They come from the same tribe, which in Afghanistan kind of means in some way that you're cousins, or they come from the same village, or your dad went to the same school as his dad. So if we were to take an intellectually dishonest approach and glorify only those that were close to us, only those who shared our ethnicity or our tribe, and whitewash the crimes of whitewash their crimes and focus entirely on the other, we're not really going to get anywhere. And I think Sangar made a really interesting point about Mazari and Haqqani, because Mazari is in the popular imagination today, amongst a lot of, he's sort of seen as a martyr, and he's speaking to Haqqani, Jalaluddin Haqqani, who later joined the movement that actually killed Mazari. Obviously, I don't think Haqqani himself, Jalaluddin, was involved in that, but it shows you how complex and intricate the relationships of these people to each other were.
Yeah.
Things I used to read about so often, all the different Afghan leaders, from Hikmat Yar to Abdul Rabb al-Rasul Sayyaf to Rabbani, Ahmed Shah Massoud, and all of those other famous leaders of the different groups that they had, is that there seemed to be something that always kept them separate and always kept them apart, and everyone was trying to vie for their own influence and power and so forth. And yet there was, at least in the minds of ordinary people, a united front that they put up against the Soviet occupation.
Yeah.
If there's anything that, it may not, and those who know the detail of it perhaps might know that there were one group fought another group after the Soviets had left. But in the minds of the world, and this is the thing that Afghanistan, and exclusively Afghanistan, has done, is that it united and fought against the occupier. One of the Americans told me this, and he tried to make me feel bad. He said, it was us. We supplied Stingers to the Afghan Mujahideen, and we did so much. And I said, tell me how many Americans died in Afghanistan against the Soviets. Tell me how many. Give me the number.
Yeah.
He couldn't give me the number. I said, no, that's 2 million more. So please don't tell me that you defeated them. It was the Afghan people through their blood and sacrifice.
And it's interesting that he mentioned Stingers, because I think Stingers were first supplied in 1985, sort of 7 years after actual war had started. So
this is a story that perhaps you don't know, right? But this is really important as to why Stinger was supplied. So I was doing the right, and there were some Afghan Mujahideen were actually brought over to the UK to be trained in the use, not of the Stinger, but something else. They were trained by SAS in the use of a blowpipe anti-aircraft missile system. The blowpipe actually turned out to be crap. It was useless. And it being British,
what was it? So it was an anti-aircraft gun.
Anti-aircraft, yeah. It was because of the helicopter. So the SAS soldiers actually said that training these people was like taking a fish into water. It was so easy. These people were just natural fighters in the mountain, and they trained them in Snowdonia, where I go for holiday every year.
I never knew about this.
Yeah, and why they bought a Stinger is because the blowpipe was crap. It didn't work, so they had to find something better, and that's when the Americans came in with the Stinger, and they started to supply it. So there was a reason that it was supposed to be the British first.
and on that note, before the Stinger, what they would do is, I know this guy who fought under Maulwi Yunus Khalis in Afghanistan. He actually, I met this guy while I was in UK. So he told me that during the Soviet occupation, they couldn't take down helicopters, so they were usually in Khost and in Paktia in the mountains. They have these very tall trees, so they knew that the helicopter would climb on the ridge of the hill and go up. Okay, so they would go and climb up on a tree, on top of the tree with an RPG, on their shoulder, and wait until the helicopter raises its nose all the way up, and then they would shoot. And sometimes they would actually hit a helicopter like that, like by extreme luck.
The accuracy of RPGs is pretty disastrous.
I've got stories of things that I saw myself and people that were from there. I remember when I went to Khost, they showed me the Lee Enfield rifle. One rifle. They said these are the rifles that we bought out from our homes that we started to use against the Soviets, and they were still had them.
Yeah.
And, probably some of the saddest things I saw is they said they dropped and left behind toys, and they showed me these toys.
Yeah.
In that talking about that I went to in '94, these toys were booby trapped, so they had little bombs in there.
Yeah.
Designed not to kill, but to maim a child.
Yeah.
And that was again to try to break the Afghan spirit. And I've got to tell you this story as well, because I've never heard of this kind of resilience. They said that when the bombs were dropping onto Afghanistan, Afghan villagers and mujahideen would gather together and gather the shrapnel, metal, and gather it all together and go and sell it in the market to buy bullets.
Yeah, true. Yeah.
The Mao Zedong said that a guerrilla must move within the people as fish move within the sea. And the Russians, the fish move within a river or a lake. Now, after a while, the policy that the Russians actually started to embark on was to just flush out the lake completely. So that is, there was an active attempt to depopulate and destroy the backbone of Afghanistan's sort of rural political economy. And that is why the refugee numbers were so high, because when we hear of, the Soviet war caused the refugee number, refugees of 6-7 million, we think of that in the contemporary day. But back then, Afghanistan's population was about, we don't have the verifiable numbers, but it was about 18 to 20 million. So we're looking at about a third of the total population being made refugees. And 1.5 to 2 million of those died, others died as well. So the toll that the war actually took is quite immense. Sangar, I wanted to ask you, I was speaking to my father, and he said that in the Soviet Jihad, he used a weapon called Yawulis Daza, which means 11-rounder in Pashto.
Yeah.
What is the actual universal name for that
weapon? I think he was referring to a Dragunov, because Dragunov has 10 rounds in the magazine and 1 in the chamber. But I'm not sure. I'm not a weapons expert, but I think it was a Dragunov.
Speaking of Khost, not too far from Khost, the route that they would take would be to a place that is in Pakistan, in the federally administered tribal areas called Tere Mangal. Which is inhabited by the Mangal tribe of Pashtuns. So, I was just curious.
It could be a Dragunov and it could be an SKS.
SKS
much more kind of, a Dragunov is less a sniper rifle, but an SKS is like just a common
Yes. Yeah, it could have been an SKS because the SKS was also very popular among Afghans in that particular era, because it was also a Soviet weapon,
Pretty much everything's a Soviet weapon.
Yeah.
I remember again listening to when I went to that camp, they told me all about these different weapons, and they said, this is Soviet, this is Soviet, this is Serbian, this is Chinese, it's no good.
Yeah, true. That's actually even today. You can buy in Afghanistan all sorts of weapons, but people prefer Soviet or real Russian-made weapons, and they are also very expensive. So that's also one other aspect that these countries still are making money over our misery. You know, they're selling those guns, and they are taking all the profit, and we're just using those weapons to kill each other.
You know, there's something you said about the amount of destruction that had been caused. I remember this was in Khost. We were walking along, and there was a well. It looked like it was a disused well, but I thought perhaps we could get some water from there. And they said, no, we don't use this. And I said, why? He said this was poisoned by the Soviets, and we never used it since then.
Yeah. That's what they did. The Soviets, what they did, they got rid of the trees because they said these people can hide behind trees. So there are regions in Afghanistan where you had trees on both sides of roads and in villages, and after Soviet occupation, all those trees were gone. Like in our village, most of the people from our village, they escaped the village and they ran to the city, or they escaped to Pakistan. But in 1990, when I was a kid, 1989 and 1990, for the first time, I went back to our village and my ancestral village, and the whole village was everything has collapsed. Everything. All houses, everything, from the masjid all the way to the smallest shed on the periphery of the village, everything collapsed, and the whole village was populated by snakes. Wherever you would go in the village, there were snakes. And I was, I think I was 7 or 8. I'm not sure how old I was. That was, by the way, the first time I fired a Kalashnikov in the village. But I was in a village, and I couldn't believe how many snakes, like in broad daylight. Usually snakes, you don't see them in broad daylight. They only move around at night because they're nocturnal hunters. But you would see below every small bush snakes, and this is how they destroyed the inhabitant of rural people in Afghanistan. It's like the amount of disregard for human life that the Soviets had. It was shocking, and it took me as a person, as a child, and then later as an adolescent, it took me very long to actually understand what I saw in Afghanistan as a child. I couldn't really comprehend it back then, because to me, most of the things I was seeing was normal. Like we were traveling from Mazar back to Kabul in an airplane, and there was a casket of a corpse stinking, the smell of a rotting body. I was I think 6 or 7 when I experienced that. And years later, when I was a teenager, and I was like, that was normal for me back then. And this is the experience of most people in Afghanistan. They experience war, they experience most horrific things, but once they're outside Afghanistan, once they're out of the crisis zone, then the dust settles, and then they feel the trauma of war and the pain that they have suffered. Everything comes back. And when we talk about the current situation in Afghanistan, we have to bear in mind that once we have peace, inshallah, it will happen soon. But once we have peace, we have to also consider how much trauma people have experienced in Afghanistan and what that is going to mean for future of this country. And the people in Afghanistan, you have to also address this continuous trauma that is resulting in maybe even more problems in the future for people in Afghanistan. But sadly, there.
Yeah, a very good friend of mine here in Birmingham, who's an Afghan, and he was held in Bagram for 6 years by the Americans. And as I said, he was young when the Soviets attacked and occupied, but his brother was killed fighting the Soviets. Speaking to him now, as you said, so he's gone through all of that process now. Dust is settling now. While that dust is settling, he has so many difficulties in terms of his mental health and stress and so forth. And this, I think, in a lot of our cultures, perhaps I'm sure in Afghani cultures it's the same, is that most of this stuff you suppress it, you keep it hidden. It's,
exactly.
It's not part of manhood to display it, to talk about it, to seek counsel and so forth. It's simply not the thing that you do at all. I think historically before, you had tribal leaders and the elders that you could speak to and so forth, and you lived in an entirely different society. But now there's a massive generational price that prisoners, widows, orphans, fighters are all going to have to pay once the dust settles. But we have to obviously pray for the dust to settle first, because that will be another problem.
And I think I'll end it on this note. It's pretty grim. It's the second part. This is the second podcast in a row, Moazzam, that I'm ending it on a grim note. But we're talking about trauma, psychological trauma, and war. This is, war has unfortunately been a reality of the human existence for as long as humans have existed. But with modern warfare, it's much more lethal, much more destructive than, for example, the war that we read or hear about in books or in films, where there was a set battlefield and a set place at a set time with two different groups. The waters are muddied. War is something people experience in their own living rooms, in their own gardens, in their own villages. It's not something that people can be insulated from. It's something that they, even if they personally are not affected by it, they see it outside when they go to the shops, when they, when they do their day-to-day activities. So, and I think amongst the countries of the world, in Afghanistan, the experience of modern warfare, and we're not talking about the Call of Duty franchise here, but modern warfare in the real sense has been, devastating to society. And I don't think anyone has escaped from that.
Yeah, you're right. The world, as a result of the, America's response to 9/11, everybody who didn't know what Afghanistan was, they know Afghanistan. They know the good of it, they know the bad of it. They know that it's a country that has been war-torn for the past 50 odd years, and Afghanistan never in modern history invaded anyone, but everyone tried to invade Afghanistan. And I think if we leave that as a note to remember that you say whatever you want, but this isn't of their doing. They didn't do it themselves. This is of theirs. And I just pray that peace, prosperity, tranquility, and ease comes to the people of Afghanistan.
Ameen.
And
Inshallah.
United, and that they become a source for good and inspiration for good for the rest of mankind.
Ameen.
And I think we'll end it on that note. So thank you very much, Moazzam, for joining us on the AfghanEye podcast. I mean, like I said, you're someone that I was reading about in the news when I was 10, 11. So it's great to finally speak to you personally. Thank you, Sangar, for joining us. Once again, thank you, Moazzam, for joining us as well. And to all of the viewers, thank you for being with us as well. To those that have subscribed to our channel, to those that have donated to us on our Patreon page in the spirit of Ramadan, or they've donated to Last Way and the other charities that we've promoted on our Twitter profiles. Thank you very much. And until next time, wassalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.